Alright, we are finally back. My grinding is complete for the week at least. Started at around 260 and ended at 1310. Not too shabby if I do say myself. And as much as I would love to make a build on the new exotics in the game, I can't. I need to wait until the chest piece is in rotation for the Lost Sector. I'm going to be showing myself doing a 1300 in this video, and let's just say I barely got off on the hook with that one. Right before we actually go into the build real quick, let me take you on a trip to my little endeavors that I went across while playing Destiny 2 15 hours each day for 3 days straight. This happened, and this happened. I let out my inner AC 130 on my Warlock, so that also happened. And this happened in the dungeon. Good times, good times. Anyway, let's carry on with the build. So, we are actually going to be redoing a build that I've done 3 times. I did it once. It's pretty crappy. I did it a second time, pretty good. I did it a third time, and that time was a suggestion, a build recommendation from someone in my YouTube comments that made the build 10 times better than it was in the previous video. And then we have this bad boy right here, which honestly, in my eyes, is the best version out of all 4 videos. This is the last time I will be making a video on the young Ahamkara spine. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, what young Ahamkaras do: increase trip mine grenade duration and blast radius ability damage grants trip mine grenade energy. And a nice little thing that it doesn't actually mention is that you can't deal damage to yourself with your own grenades. So basically what we're going to be doing with the Ahamkaras is whenever we throw a grenade, we're going to be getting some grenade energy back, and while doing that, we're going to be using our melee, our knife trick, because we're going to be using middle tree to get us our grenade back that much faster. Moving on to the subclass, middle tree is what we're going to be using because of knife trick, and what knife trick does is it basically burns enemies and recharges our dodge as well as our melee incredibly fast. We're going to be using this along with young Ahamkara's spine to be regenerating all of our abilities extremely fast. Burning Edge is going to be a part of that rotation of why we're going to be getting our abilities back super fast, alongside playing with fire. Now, quick little thing to note with playing with fire is that it can have 3 stacks. 1 stack, just a little bit recharge rate, 2 stacks, a little bit more, and 3 stacks is what you really want. So try to keep 3 stacks consistent. It's pretty easy. I think it's a 15-second timer. So make sure you keep resetting that clock when you get 3 times stacks, because that's going to be getting your recharge rate for your melee and your dodge. Oh, and also run Gambler's Dodge as well. Moving on to the weapons. Weapons can be whatever you want. These are the 3 weapons that I would prefer to use, but you can mix and match these however you possibly want. For me, I'm using a friction fire as wellspring, a salvager salvo, I think that's how you say that, with demolitionist, and I'm also using the lament. The friction fire and the salvagers are just being used to actually get us our abilities back. Salvagers is what we're going to be using most of the time for endgame content, such as the lost sectors that are 1300 and 1330, and our lament is going to be replaced by rocket launchers at times, depending on what we're actually doing. If we need to keep our distance from bosses, then a rocket launcher would be the preferred option. If you're doing nightfalls and such where you can get close to some bosses, then using a sword is recommended because it does some insane DPS output, especially for using lament and falling guillotine. Moving on to stats. For stats can be whatever you want. If I were to recommend anything to you, I would try to have 100 discipline alongside some more strength than I have. Having that extra strength will make the playing with fire recharge rate a little bit more, and having a little bit more ability will make your recharge rate for your dodge that much faster as well. So either having your dodge or your melee back would both be great options, preferably probably your mobility, but that is 100% up to you. Other stats that I would note getting as well is recovery and possibly resilience if you want, but if I were to suggest 2 to 3 main stats to go for, I would go with discipline, strength, as well as mobility. Mobility can actually be scratched off for recovery. Intellect I wouldn't worry about whatsoever because we're actually using a mod called Font of Wisdom, and I'll go over that in just a little bit. Moving on to the mods, I'll go over the Charge of Light mods first, the main ones, and I'll go over the Elemental Well mods as well. And then finally, I'll go over the little side mods that I think are worth noting as well. All right, now that we got stats out of the way, we're going to be moving on to mods. First mod that I want to go over is Elemental Ordnance. This is probably the most important one, and what this does is whenever we defeat a combatant with a grenade, we're going to be generating an elemental well. Now this is important because we're going to be getting grenade kills very, very often. We're almost always going to have a grenade back due to our subclass as well as our demolitionist and wellspring on our other weapons, and we want everything to focus into Elemental Ordnance and our grenades because our elemental wells is going to be the sole system for making this build work. Elemental Ordnance is going to be dropping us our elemental wells, and those those elemental wells are going to be the system for getting us charged with light, which leads us into the next mod, elemental charge. Now, what elemental charge does is whenever we pick up an elemental well, we will immediately get 2 stacks of charged with light. Alongside that mod, whenever we pick up the elemental wells, we are also going to be getting the font of wisdom. Now, what this does is it basically just increases our intellect by a significant amount. I was seeing a lot of comments on some of my recent videos, and a lot of them were saying that it brings your intellect to 100. I was also looking on Reddit and Twitter and seeing some posts saying the same thing, but I was also seeing some stuff saying that it increases the intellect by 80, so I'm not exactly sure. I also covered this in my Void Warlock that I put out not too long ago, and it seemed as though that it brought my 30 intellect all the way up to 100. But basically what I'm trying to say is that Font of Wisdom is a really great mod. Try to get your intellect to at least 20, and if you can't even do that, if it's like 10 or something, I doubt having that low intellect will really matter that much when running Font of Wisdom. And the last 2 mods that I want to go over that are Charge of Light mods is going to be consuming the Charge of Light stacks, and the first one is Energy Converter. We're going to be using this for the first half of our super bar, and what this does is while Charge of Light using your grenade attack grants you super energy, consuming all stacks of Charge with Light. The more stacks you have, the more energy you gain, up to a maximum of 50%. Now, we're only going to be having 2 stacks of Charge of Light at most, but we're going to be getting those Charge of Light stacks extremely frequently. So having the benefit of Energy Converter with those Charge of Light stacks whenever we throw our grenades, which we're going to be doing consistently, is going to add up to a significant portion. The other Charge of Light mod that we're using for the other half of the super bar, since Energy Converter will only work up to 50% of our super, is Lucent Blade. This is going to be for bosses, so with Lucent Blade, I'm also going to be noting Argent Ordnance. Both mods work perfectly well. If you have a rocket launcher such as Isis Tomorrow, for example, that would be amazing boss DPS. But unfortunately, I don't have it quite yet, so I'm using Tomorrow's answer. Anyway, Lucent Blade. What this does, while Charge with Light, dealing damage with the sword gives you bonus sword damage for 5 seconds, consuming 1 stack of Charge with Light. And what Argent Ordnance does is while Charge with Light, readying or firing a rocket launcher grants the increased damage and reload speed. Damaging a combatant with a rocket consumes 1 stack of Charged with Light. This is what we're going to be using to consume our Charge of Light stacks whenever we're not using Energy Converter. The other mods worth noting are mods such as Ashes to Assets, gain bonus super energy on grenade kills. You can run 2 of those if you'd like. Impact Induction as well as Momentum Transfer will both be good options as well. Impact Induction makes it so that you get grenade cooldown whenever we deal damage with our melee, and Momentum Transfer is the opposite, where causing damage with a grenade reduces the melee cooldown instead. I don't actually have these mods because I don't have enough materials to upgrade my armor anymore, but other mods that I would recommend going for is Sniper Damage Resistance or even Melee Damage Resistance. Both of these come in handy when doing the lost sectors and stuff where you need to stay away from the enemy and you need as much damage resistance as you possibly can. And Outreach as well as Bomber are also great options as well, preferably Bomber if you really want to choose one of the 2. And what Bomber does is it reduces grenade cooldown when using your class ability, and what Outreach does is it just does the same thing for melee instead. Alright, that is going to be the build. This is for sure the last time that I'm making this build. Again, don't quote me on that, but honestly, I don't mind making videos for these gauntlets at all. These are probably my favorite gauntlets and probably one of my favorite exotics for hunters in the game. It's really fun to mess around with, and Solar is my favorite class. It's been that way since year 1 of Destiny 1, and y'all, Ahamkara's spine just makes me love it so much more. Alright, that's gonna be it. If you guys have any recommendations or any ideas you want me to cover, feel free to let me know. And with that being said, I will see you in the next video. Peace.